You see, one of the greatest disservices we do to ourselves is to forget that our journey is ours alone. We allow ourselves to be pulled into the rhythm of the crowd, trying to walk someone else's path, wear someone else's shoes, carry someone else's burden. And the irony, half the time the person we're imitating is just as lost as we are, trying to imitate someone else too. It becomes this endless cycle of comparison, mimicry, and silent frustration. And before we know it, we're moving, yes, but not forward, just sideways, just lost. But if you really pause for a moment, just sit with yourself, you'll realize something that many people go their whole lives missing. You are not supposed to be like anyone else. You were never meant to look like them, walk like them, succeed like them, or struggle like them. You were meant to live your life with your unique combination of strengths, challenges, timing, and purpose. That uniqueness isn't an accident, it's a responsibility. Now, I understand this is easier said than done. We live in a world that constantly parades the highlights of other people's lives in front of our eyes. Social media, curated success stories, filtered versions of reality. It all tricks us into thinking that we're falling behind, that if we're not there yet, we failed. But ask yourself this, where exactly is there? What are you chasing? Whose definition of success are you running after? Philosophically, we can look to the wisdom of the ancients. Socrates, for instance, said that an unexamined life is not worth living. But today we're doing the opposite. We're examining everyone else's life while ignoring our own. We scroll, we compare, we criticize ourselves, all the while drifting further and further from what truly matters: self-awareness, purpose, sincerity. From a psychological standpoint, this comparison trap isn't just unhelpful, it's harmful. Psychologists call it social comparison theory. The idea that we determine our own social and personal worth based on how we stack up against others. But here's the problem: when you compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, you are always going to come up short. Always. Because you're not comparing reality to reality, you're comparing your process to their presentation. And it's not just a self-esteem issue. This mindset undermines discipline. It drains motivation. It even stunts spiritual and emotional growth. Because your focus shifts outward, what they're doing, what they're achieving, how they're being perceived, instead of inward toward your own development. Let's be honest. How can you possibly improve in a meaningful way when your attention is fragmented across everyone else's progress? How can you build self-respect when your measuring stick is constantly being adjusted to match someone else's achievements? Sometimes people say, "But I just want to be inspired by others." That's fair. Inspiration is important. But there's a fine line between inspiration and imitation. Inspiration should elevate you, not erase you. If seeing someone succeed makes you doubt your own worth, that's not inspiration. That's insecurity disguised as admiration. So what do we do instead? We start by turning inward. We ask ourselves the hard questions: what matters to me? What am I being called to build? Where am I right now? And where do I truly want to go? Not based on the crowd, not based on society, but based on my values, my priorities, and my faith. And once you begin to clarify your journey, everything changes. You stop rushing. You stop resenting other people's blessings. You stop trying to force your life to look like someone else's. Instead, you begin to walk slowly, steadily, with intention, with grace, with gratitude. And that kind of walking, it's not glamorous, it's not loud, it doesn't always get likes or applause, but it builds something deeper. It builds alignment between who you are and how you live. This is where the power lies. Because when you stop chasing the crowd and start honoring your own journey, you become grounded. And grounded people don't panic, they don't chase, they don't compete. They build, they reflect, they endure. That kind of mindset, it outlasts trends. It outgrows insecurity. It transforms the entire trajectory of your life. But remember, this doesn't mean the journey will be easy. Your path may look different. It might feel lonely at times. There might be moments where it seems like everyone else is flying ahead while you're still taking baby steps. But don't let the illusion of speed fool you. A journey rooted in truth, in self-awareness, in divine purpose, in personal conviction will always bear more fruit than one built on imitation and noise. Even from a spiritual angle, we see this lesson repeated again and again. The prophets themselves, peace be upon them, were never part of the crowd. They didn't fit into popular opinion. They didn't chase trends. They stood alone when they had to. Why? Because the truth often requires standing apart. And if you truly want to walk in alignment with something higher than ego, higher than the fleeting standards of this world, you must be willing to trust your path, even when no one claps for it. So, if you've been feeling inadequate because someone else got there faster, pause. If you've been doubting your worth because someone else seems more together, breathe. Come back to yourself, come back to your Lord, ask, what is my path? What is my assignment? And how can I walk it with sincerity, even when it's quiet, even when it's hard? Because in the end, the crowd won't set be there to answer for your life. You will. And you won't set be asked, why didn't set you do what they did? You set be asked, what did you do with what you were given? Your life is your trust. Your path is your test. Walk it with your head high, your heart open, and your eyes fixed, not on the crowd, but on the destination. The journey is yours, and that is more than enough reason to walk it with purpose. Let me ask you something. Who are you really listening to? It's a question most people never stop to ask. Because from a young age we're trained to tune into the noise of the crowd, the expectations of society, the opinions of family, the commentary of strangers. And little by little, without even realizing it, we begin to hand over the steering wheel of our lives to people who aren't even going where we're going. It's as if we're boarding a train based on how many people are on it, not whether it's heading in the right direction. And here's the truth we often miss. The crowd doesn't know your destination. They don't see what you've been shown in your quiet moments. They don't understand the burden that weighs on your heart, the vision that lives in your mind, the calling that keeps you awake at night. That calling wasn't given to them. It was given to you. So why let them lead? It's a strange thing, how quick we are to trade authenticity for approval. We change our direction, tone down our ambition, shrink our dreams just to fit in. But the problem is, in fitting in, we often lose ourselves. And ironically, the same crowd we're trying so hard to please is usually too distracted, too busy dealing with their own fears to even notice what we gave up to gain their acceptance. Philosophically, this brings us to a deeper idea, the danger of consensus. Just because many people believe something or do something doesn't make it true or right or wise. In fact, history shows us that some of the most dangerous choices were made because people blindly followed the majority. The crowd crucified prophets. The crowd doubted visionaries. The crowd resisted change until that very change became undeniable. So don't confuse volume with truth. The number of voices saying something doesn't validate the message. Often the loudest voices are speaking from their own wounds, their own fears, their own limitations. And if you let them dictate your direction, you'll inherit those limitations too. Psychologically, we're wired to seek social proof. We feel safer when others agree with us. It gives us the illusion that we're making the right decision. But following the crowd isn't always a sign of wisdom. Sometimes it's just a fear of walking alone. And that fear can be very costly. Many people live their entire lives trying to gain the approval of those who don't even approve of themselves. Parents projecting their unfulfilled dreams onto their children. Friends giving advice based on their own regrets. Society rewarding conformity while punishing authenticity. But the question is, how long will you let other people's unresolved issues shape your reality? Because at some point, you must choose live by their expectations or live by your truth. You can't have both. Every time you say yes to someone else's version of your life, you are saying no to your own. And eventually that gap becomes unbearable. That's when people wake up years later realizing they climbed the ladder only to find it was leaning against the wrong wall. But the good news, and hear this clearly, is that you are allowed to choose differently. You are allowed to question the crowd. You are allowed to take a turn no one understands. You are allowed to honor your intuition, your faith, your insight, even when no one else sees what you see. And if you're afraid of walking alone, remember this: solitude is not the enemy of growth. Distraction is. Being alone doesn't mean being lost. It often means you're finally hearing your own voice again after years of being drowned out by everyone else's. There's a reason the most powerful transformations happen in isolation. You don't find your purpose in a crowd. You don't hear divine inspiration in the noise of popularity. You find it in silence, in reflection, in moments where it's just you and your Creator, and no one else's opinion matters. From a spiritual lens, we're reminded time and again the path of truth is rarely crowded. When Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, stood alone against the idol worship of his people, he was outnumbered, but he was right. When Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, led the children of Israel to the sea, it looked impossible. The crowd behind him was full of doubt, but he moved forward with trust. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, at the beginning of his mission, stood virtually alone in a society that mocked and resisted him, but his commitment to truth reshaped history. So why are we so surprised when our own path requires courage? Why do we expect our journey to be smooth and widely understood? If you are building something meaningful, expect to be misunderstood. If you are walking in obedience to a calling others don't feel, expect some resistance. That resistance isn't a sign that you're wrong, it's often proof that you're growing. Now, I'm not saying we don't seek advice. Wisdom is found in good counsel. But there is a difference between advice and control. Guidance uplifts, control suffocates. And you have to learn the difference, because not every voice deserves access to your inner compass. Not everyone who speaks into your life has earned the right to lead you. Learn to filter. Learn to protect your direction. Because if you let the wrong crowd steer you, you might reach a destination, but it won't be yours. You'll arrive at a version of life that feels hollow, misaligned, exhausting. And then what? Start over? For some, that realization comes too late. But you still have time. You can still choose wisely. So don't let the noise distract you from your purpose. The crowd might be louder, they might be faster, but they're not necessarily going where you're meant to go. You must learn to walk by clarity, not by consensus. And clarity, my friends, doesn't come from the crowd. It comes from within, from knowing your values, from listening to your heart, from turning to your Lord with sincerity and asking, what do you want for me? What path have you written for me? Even if it's different from everyone else's. That kind of alignment gives you strength. It gives you focus. It gives you peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on applause or validation, but is rooted in obedience, in trust, in purpose. So as you continue your journey, remember this: the crowd may have opinions, but they don't have your map. They didn't see your dreams. They weren't there in your moments of prayer. They don't carry your burdens. They don't know your mission. They weren't given your vision, so they don't get to guide your steps. Let me remind you of something we often forget in a world obsessed with visibility. Real progress isn't always public. Some of the most profound growth you'll ever experience won't be visible to anyone but you. It won't be posted. It won't be praised. It won't be noticed by the crowd. But it will be real, and it will be powerful. We live in an age where everything seems to be about being seen. We've equated visibility with value, as if something only matters when it's documented, when it's shared, when it's admired. And slowly, whether we realize it or not, we start shifting our focus away from genuine inner development toward performative progress. We want to be seen improving, seen succeeding, seen healing. But growth was never supposed to be a performance. It's a process, and it often happens in silence. Now think about it. How many times have you looked at someone and thought, they've really got it all together, only to find out later that they were struggling behind the scenes? And how often have you looked at yourself in your quiet, messy, unseen efforts and thought, I'm not doing enough, simply because no one noticed? This mindset is dangerous, not because it leads to arrogance, but because it feeds a kind of internal discontent, the illusion that if no one sees it, it doesn't count, that if your effort isn't acknowledged, it must not be meaningful. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Philosophically, let's look deeper. The ancient Stoics, for example, taught that virtue, the highest good, must be pursued for its own sake, not for recognition. In other words, doing what's right, what's noble, what's necessary, is meaningful even if no one claps for you. And spiritually, this teaching echoes across traditions. Sincerity is the measure of value, not display, not drama, sincerity. Because what is done for show may impress people, but what is done in private impresses your soul. Psychologically, we know that validation is a powerful motivator, but it's also a dangerous addiction. When we become dependent on external validation, we risk shaping our lives around other people's approval instead of our own principles. And over time, that disconnect between our true self and our public self leads to burnout, anxiety, even identity confusion. Many people burn out, not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. They're chasing applause instead of alignment. They're building a life that looks good, but doesn't feel right. And deep down, they know it. That quiet discomfort, that sense of being off track even when everything looks perfect on the outside. That's your soul calling you back to authenticity. Some of your greatest breakthroughs will come in seasons when no one is watching. When you're waking up early, praying quietly, making tough decisions, letting go of harmful habits, walking away from toxic people, and no one sees it, no one applauds it, but you keep going because it's right. That's real strength. That's real maturity. You see, we often underestimate the power of unseen work. Think of a seed. Before it ever breaks the surface of the soil, it spends time in complete darkness. It's growing roots, establishing its foundation silently, invisibly. If you were to judge its growth by what's above the ground, you'd think nothing is happening. But underground, a transformation is taking place. And when it finally emerges, it's ready to withstand wind, rain, pressure, because it's anchored. You don't get that kind of strength from surface level growth. You get it from depth. In the same way, the efforts you make in silence when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, are laying the foundation for the kind of character, resilience, and purpose that will last. The kind that can withstand pressure, disappointment, even failure without collapsing. But we have to unlearn the habit of performing. You're not here to impress people. You're here to grow, and sometimes growth looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like setbacks. Sometimes it looks like saying no to opportunities because they don't align with your values. And yes, sometimes it looks like walking away from the spotlight altogether so you can actually heal, actually reflect, actually live. There's a quiet dignity in private effort, in doing what's right, even when it's not recognized, in staying consistent, even when no one's watching, in building your character when no one is giving you credit. And the beauty is, what you build in silence will eventually speak for itself. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that public success is bad, but public success without private integrity is hollow. What's the point of being admired by the world if you can't sit with yourself in peace? What's the point of applause if your heart feels empty? And from a spiritual lens, we're taught again and again that the unseen matters more than the seen. It's not the actions performed for show that are accepted, it's the ones done with sincerity. The prayer you pray alone, the charity you give in secret, the forgiveness you extend when no one knows, that's where your real value lies. That's what builds you. So don't worry if no one sees your progress. Don't worry if your victories aren't loud, if your healing is slow, if your journey is quiet. The most beautiful transformations don't announce themselves, they unfold, and they endure. Sometimes people will only notice your growth once it benefits them. They'll only respect your discipline once it turns into results. But don't let that discourage you. You're not growing for applause. You're growing for alignment, for peace, for purpose, for God. You don't need to be seen to be valid. You don't need to be praised to be worthy. You don't need the crowd to clap for your quiet progress to mean something. Because in the end, the deepest, most meaningful changes happen where no one else is looking, in the heart, in the mind, in the soul. So keep showing up, even in silence, even in solitude, because real growth doesn't seek attention. It seeks truth. Let's speak honestly now. One of the most damaging habits we carry, often without realizing it, is the habit of comparison. Quiet, subtle, even socially accepted. It creeps into our thoughts, shaping how we see ourselves and how we measure our lives. And yet, if you look closely, you'll realize something that's both obvious and profound. Comparison kills clarity. You cannot truly see yourself, who you are, what you're capable of, what path you're meant to walk, while your eyes are constantly fixed on someone else. It's like trying to drive a car while staring at the one in the next lane. Eventually you'll crash, and that's exactly what many of us are doing. We're swerving off course, doubting our direction, slowing down, not because we're tired, but because we keep looking sideways, wondering if we're doing enough, having enough, being enough. But here's the thing. Your clarity, your inner vision, your sense of purpose is fragile. It needs protection. And comparison is one of the fastest ways to cloud it. Because when you compare, you don't see truth, you see distortion. You see someone else's highlight, their filtered success, their polished outcome, and you hold it up against your own raw, unfinished, behind-the-scenes journey. That's not fair. That's not real. But it feels real. And that feeling is what makes it so dangerous. Psychologically, comparison is rooted in insecurity. It's often less about admiring others and more about questioning ourselves. Why don't I have that? Why am I not there yet? What's wrong with me? And instead of answering those questions with patience, with introspection, we answer them with self-doubt. We start chasing someone else's path, thinking it must be better. We start copying, not creating, following, not leading. And then the worst part happens, we lose ourselves. Philosophically, this raises a critical issue, the problem of authenticity. When we live by comparison, we stop living from the inside out and start living from the outside in. Instead of asking, what's true for me? What am I here to contribute? We start asking, what are they doing? What do they have that I don't? And slowly our clarity turns to confusion, our direction turns to distraction, our journey turns into a competition. But let me ask you this, how can you compare two people with different souls, different strengths, different timelines, different trials, and expect it to be fair? You can't. You weren't created to be like them. You were created to be fully, deeply, sincerely you. And the moment you forget that, you trade the power of your identity for the illusion of someone else's. From a spiritual perspective, comparison is not just unwise, it's ungrateful. Because when you constantly look at what others have, you neglect what you've been given. You miss the blessings in your own hands. You dismiss your own growth. And worse, you question the wisdom of the one who created you uniquely. If he wanted you to have their life, you would have it. But he gave you your life, with all its challenges and blessings, for a reason. It's not a mistake that you're where you are. It's not a failure that you're taking longer, struggling more, or walking a quieter path. That may be exactly what your soul needs to grow, to purify, to strengthen. But you'll only see that if you stop comparing long enough to look inward. One of the most liberating shifts you can make is this. Stop asking, why don't I have what they have, and start asking, what can I do with what I've been given? That shift takes you from envy to empowerment, from distraction to focus, from scarcity to gratitude. Because the truth is, comparison doesn't just cloud your mind, it drains your energy. How much time have we wasted scrolling through someone else's life, analyzing their success, dissecting their image, only to end up more confused about our own goals? That time could have been used to reflect, to plan, to build. But we gave it away, not to inspiration, but to insecurity. And let's be real, half the time, what we're comparing ourselves to isn't even real. It's curated, it's filtered, it's polished for public consumption. People show you what they want you to see. You see the medal, not the injury, the smile, not the tears, the success, not the sacrifices. So even the object of our comparison is distorted. We're chasing a version of someone that doesn't even exist in full, and measuring ourselves against that illusion. This is why clarity requires discipline. You have to guard your focus. You have to know when to disconnect, when to go inward, when to silence the noise. Because your clarity is not going to come from the world. It's going to come from within, from honest reflection, from sincere effort, from purposeful solitude, from prayer, from asking, what is my purpose? And being brave enough to follow it even if no one else is. And here's something important. Clarity often looks like stillness before it looks like speed. Sometimes you're not behind, you're just being prepared. You're being refined. And while it may look like others are flying ahead, don't forget, a plane doesn't take off without time on the runway. Your runway is not a delay, it's preparation. Stop comparing someone's takeoff to your alignment. Your moment will come, but only if you stay on your path. Clarity requires you to stop looking side to side and start looking forward. You can't receive guidance if you're constantly distracted. You can't move with purpose if your head is filled with noise. And you cannot, under any circumstance, become who you were meant to be while trying to be someone else. So if you've been lost in comparison, if you felt small, confused, off track, come back. Come back to your center. Come back to your creator. Ask, what am I here for? What's my next step? Then take that step with sincerity, with humility, and with focus. You don't need to be like anyone else. You need to be fully you. That's where your power is. That's where your purpose is. That's where your peace is. Stop looking sideways. Clarity lies straight ahead. Let's take a moment to reflect on how we define success. Not just what we say out loud, but how we actually feel when we evaluate our own progress. Because here's the reality, too many people are measuring their lives with borrowed metric standards handed to them by society, family, or social media. They're moving, yes, but they're moving with no map of their own. And then they wonder why, even when they achieve something, it doesn't feel fulfilling. You see, if you don't define your own milestones, intentional, personal, and meaningful ones, the world will do it for you. And the world doesn't know your purpose. The world doesn't care about your peace. It rewards appearances. It celebrates speed. It claps for noise. But you're not here for all that. You're here for truth, for depth, for a kind of success that isn't hollow but whole. This is why it's absolutely essential to set intentional milestones. To decide for yourself what progress looks like, what matters most, and what kind of life you want to build. Without this clarity, you'll forever feel like you're behind, even when you're right where you need to be. Psychologically, this is deeply important. When we don't create internal benchmarks for growth, we unconsciously adopt external ones. We start measuring ourselves against timelines that were never meant for us. Timelines based on age, money, status, visibility. And when we don't match up, we internalize failure. Not because we failed, but because we were aiming at the wrong target from the start. But when your milestones are intentional, when they are rooted in your values, your calling, your circumstances, everything changes. You stop rushing, you stop comparing, you start honoring your pace, your process, and your purpose. You start to feel anchored, not anxious. Let's break this down. Say someone else's milestone is buying a house by 30. That might be meaningful for them, their situation, their priorities. But maybe your milestone is overcoming financial trauma, or building a career that aligns with your values, or raising a child in a nurturing environment. And maybe those things don't come with trophies or applause, but they matter deeply, they count, and they are valid. Philosophically, this comes back to a fundamental truth. The meaning of a life well lived cannot be standardized. You cannot impose a universal formula for purpose or fulfillment. What gives you peace might not mean anything to someone else, and that's okay. What matters is that it means something to you. There's a hadith that speaks volumes here, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, part of someone's excellence in Islam is leaving what does not concern him. There's so much wisdom in that. Part of living well is not worrying about what other people are doing, achieving, or chasing. It's about narrowing your focus, aligning your actions with your values, and letting go of the constant comparison that clouds your judgment. Because the truth is, you'll never feel satisfied if you're chasing milestones that don't reflect who you really are. And you'll never feel peace if your success is dependent on being seen or validated. Real fulfillment comes when your progress is in alignment with your soul, not your image. So, how do you set intentional milestones? You begin with honesty. You ask the questions many people avoid. What do I actually value? What kind of life do I want to lead? What's worth sacrificing for? And then you work backward. You build goals around that, around meaning, around legacy, around contribution, not around what looks good or what sounds impressive. It also means celebrating small wins, and I cannot stress this enough. We're conditioned to think that only big achievements are worthy of recognition, the degree, the job title, the six-figure income, the platform, but often the most courageous and significant victories are quiet, getting out of bed while battling depression, choosing to forgive when your heart is still in pieces, saying no to something that once defined you. These are not minor moments, they are milestones of spiritual and emotional maturity, and they deserve to be acknowledged. In fact, celebrating small wins is part of what keeps you moving forward. Psychology tells us that progress, not perfection, is what sustains motivation. You don't need to be at the finish line to be proud of how far you've come. You just need to keep stepping one honest, intentional step at a time. But there's a discipline to this. You have to stay connected to your why. Because when you forget why you started, you'll get distracted by outcomes. You'll start chasing approval instead of alignment. You'll shift your goals to match other people's expectations, and soon enough you'll be off track, wondering why you feel so empty. So return to your why often, revisit your intentions, reflect on your growth. Don't just look at where you are. Look at how far you've come. And don't just ask, what have I achieved? Ask, who have I become? Because who you're becoming matters more than what you're collecting. And remember, not all progress is measurable. Some of the most transformative shifts in your life can't be captured in numbers or titles. They live in the way you think, the way you speak, the way you show up with integrity even when no one is watching. That's real growth. And often it happens long before anyone else sees the fruit. From a spiritual angle, this is especially important. In Islam, we're taught that intention, niyyah, carries immense weight. A small act, done with sincerity, may be more beloved to Allah than a large act done for show. So never underestimate the power of your quiet, sincere efforts. Even if the world doesn't see them, your Lord does, and that's enough. So if you've been feeling behind, take a breath. If you've been doubting your progress because it doesn't match someone else's timeline, take a step back. Ask yourself, am I growing in the right direction? And if the answer is yes, even slowly, then keep going. Don't rush it. Don't question it. Just stay consistent. Your milestones don't need to impress the world. They just need to reflect your truth. Set them with care. Pursue them with patience. Celebrate them with gratitude. Because in the end, it's not about being ahead of others. It's about being aligned with yourself.